after a Supreme Court ruling found that 2 COVID fines issued during Sydney's lockdown were invalid. Redfern Legal Center solicitor Samantha Lee brought the case on behalf of 3 clients who received fines between $1,000 and $3,000 in 2021. Remember this from the New South Wales Police back then?
We're moving much further into a compliance and an enforcement regime around the order rather than a simple education response to people.
I'm sure he regrets that statement. Rather than taking the simple approach of education, we now know the heavy-handed enforcement approach by New South Wales Police, apart from being at tremendous expense of public monies, that it was just unjust. Here's lawyer Samantha Lee.
The process was unjust, messy, and the rule of law was not followed.
33,000 fines will be withdrawn or refunded, and that's a lot of rule of law not being followed by New South Wales Police. Samantha Lee was also responsible for causing a review back in June 2021 when she called for COVID fines issued to those with a disability as well as children to be withdrawn. 3,840 fines were issued to children between the ages of 13 and 17 years old. Let's hear from lawyer Samantha Lee again.
These children have been fined for $1,000, $3,000 and $5,000. One child who has an intellectual disability was given 3 $1,000 fines for being out of his house. I'm of the view that he should never have been issued a fine. Under the Fines Act, someone who has an intellectual disability should not be issued with a fine.
One of her clients, Rowan Prank, was fined for just sitting in a park.
Me and my girlfriend were sitting in Sydney Park. It was a warm day, lots of people were there. We knew that sitting in parks, outdoor recreation was one of the few things that was allowed at the time. And a group of police officers came over and fined us for, I guess, supposedly not currently exercising at the time, which I then looked up later was actually allowed. I was allowed to be in the park. And then I started the process of trying to rectify this issue.
New South Wales public money was used to fund a barrister to represent the New South Wales state, a role usually performed by police prosecutors, which highlights the desperate extent the New South Wales government went to uphold its COVID-19 enforcement over public education response, only conceding the day of the trial, which was today, admitting the fines did not adequately describe the offence and therefore were invalid. Revenue New South Wales will now withdraw a total of more than 33,000 fines, and it means that those that have already been paid the COVID fines will receive a refund. Scott Johnson from Revenue New South Wales said the decision was made in the interest of being consistent and equitable and will be refunding close to $10 million that has already been paid, and it will start immediately. Barrister Catherine Richardson, senior counsel who represented the plaintiffs, said afterwards that her client had in effect been forced to take the extraordinary step of going to the Supreme Court after other unsuccessful attempts to have the fines reviewed failed. She said it was only at the 11th hour that the Crown finally accepted that these were invalid. Whilst this case is not binding here in WA, it highlights that there was a consistent response by state governments towards heavy-handed enforcement, a far departure from the community policing which they talk about, where it was very clear early on that there was a massive departure from the rule of law. This also highlights the course of action a person must take to defend unjust fines of this nature, and that it must have to go all the way to the Supreme Court, which is just absurd in itself. As well as the outcome, it would not have been possible unless lawyers like Samantha Lee stood up as she did and take on cases like this.
Fines have a crippling impact on people, particularly those who are in disadvantaged circumstances. We know that a large percentage of fines were issued to First Nations people, to children, and those on a low or no wage. This is a case for them, those out in Western Sydney who were issued a fine not according to law. This is about the power of the people coming forward and putting the state to the test and making sure that they had justice and recourse.
This has been a live stream on some breaking news. I'm Lindsay from Freedom Media WA. Enjoy your evening. This is